Well, let me open by asking if any of those, and I'm sure so many, everyone in this room is following the news this week. The UN General Assembly is opening. And it's important to take note that capitalism in decay, it really lets off the stench of decay. And you just have to ask, how low can they go? I mean, it's pretty raw what has been the news coverage this week, and beyond the outrage that we can even expect in ordinary times. It's like all the norms of the corporate media are ripped off. And it's really dangerous, because continuing war in a time of crisis means that the media have to use their resources to mobilize the dogs of war. I mean, the real dregs of society. When you see headlines, the New York Post this week, big picture of President Ahmadinejad of Iran, and half the page is a headline that says, "Piece of shit." I mean, or the Daily News, "Go to hell." Or the front page text, "Let's really give him the finger." I mean, this is pretty raw. This is talking about an elected president, head of state, here to address the United Nations. Imperialism mobilizes racism, and they want to whip it up and make it uglier, more vicious than even at any time in the past. These are major newspapers. You can imagine, here's the heads of state of the world and their entourages in New York, and they open up newspapers like this. What do they think? They're also taking note of just how much when Netanyahu from Israel holds up in his UN address a big picture of a bomb and draws a red line through it to justify why an attack on Iran is essential. Now, to threaten to attack a country, to even threaten war against a country, is considered a war crime. But that's now standard operating procedure. Now, there was another story running in the media all this week that we want to take note of. And that was Pamela Geller, this arch right-wing racist, and her Stop the Islamicization. How much coverage was there of these MTA ads, which the MTA said, well, our hands are tied. We just have to run these ads. We asked the courts, and the courts told us we had to. Not true. The courts told them they needed more explicit guidelines, and they didn't bother to put that through. But here's the multi-billion-dollar agency with whole floors of lawyers who know how to put something off for 10 years into the future. They don't want it to come up in the courts, and could appeal it till 10 years from now. And they say, well, our hands are tied. We just have to run these ads calling Muslim people savages in the struggle against civilization and savagery. So we want to take note of that. Or even the amount of coverage. Now Geller paid for 10 ads in the New York City bus transit subway system, the largest subway system in the Western Hemisphere. There's about 8.5 million people a day that use mass transit in New York City. There's several 100,000 ads on the subways, the buses, the tunnels, and so on. But the news media gave a lot of attention showing this racist ad again and again and again, all while saying, isn't it terrible? Here it is. Just in case you missed the word, let's show it to you again. So now we have two challenges of this, because unless we take it seriously and mobilize seriously, really as a revolutionary organization, we take attacks on the most oppressed of our class the most seriously. There are two events I want to mention. One is a demonstration in Harlem next Sunday, October 7th. It's part of international demonstrations around the country, around the world. There's about 45 demonstrations now internationally focused on the war at home and the war abroad. And this is an important contribution. It's called by UNAC, the United National Anti-War Coalition, but really linking the war here at home, the stop and frisk, the roundups, the raids, the voter suppression, happening on a huge scale all over the country, the millions of youth, the mass incarceration, all of that, with the war abroad. And the idea for having it in Harlem really came when the Islamic Leadership Council asked to get the Harlem State Office building. And we're told that this state building wasn't available for Muslims. So they had their own campaign to really assure that this space would be available for an anti-war demonstration. And they took it very seriously. So this demonstration next Sunday, it begins at 4 o'clock. And there are demonstrations up and down the East Coast on Friday, on Saturday, and on Sunday. Demonstrations around the world. There's going to be a huge demonstration against the drones in Pakistan on the same time. In Iran, along with in London and many in Canada and whatnot, and about 45 in this country. But the one in New York has really taken on importance politically. And part of it, the organizing is happening also the Harlem Tenants Council, the South Bronx Community Congress, DRUM, along with the IAC, being done on very short notice, but we really want to pay it all attention. We have flyers here I'll pass out afterwards because of that link of the war at home and the war abroad. Now, just to mention also something else that just happened on Tuesday, and we should really take note of this. Comrade Shahid in the Pakistan-USA Freedom Forum said, the UN, the opening session, we can't be silent with everything that's happening. And a demonstration against the drones, which fall every single day in Pakistan. It's an undeclared war, but it is a big war. Every single day, a bombing of a different village, a different site. So this picket line last Tuesday had I don't think it had any coverage here, but it did have world coverage, very important world coverage. And we really should thank Comrade Shahid for organizing it. Now, just to say also a word about Pamela Geller, because the way in which she spoke to international prominence and her racist committee was an attack on an Islamic center that was blocks from the World Trade Center 2 years ago, where the press gave her huge coverage. I hired a media firm, which she's also done this time. And it's important, there's been attacks going on against Islamic centers and mosques all across the country. Fire bombings, being told it doesn't meet zoning codes, they can't get building permits. It's not only New York City. This is true as a national campaign, and everywhere facing attacks that this is a gathering of terrorists, savages, as we see from that terrible line. And it's part of the war climate. And what we did 2 years ago, what we did last year in mobilizing mass opposition to that racist campaign really made a deep impact on many Islamic groups right here in New York City. That there were allies, not on a religious basis, but allies because this is an oppressed grouping under attack as part of the mobilization against war. And that the building of an Islamic center, a mosque, a prayer center, I mean, we don't have to even refer to the Constitution and freedom of religion. The bourgeoisie has thrown that out if it has to do with a group under attack. In the same way in an earlier time that black churches were firebombed by the Klan. We should make that analogy and know that that is the way in which Dr. Martin Luther King and all of the attacks that came on African-American ministers in an earlier time. So defending the Muslim groups that are under attack is an important way of battling this war climate, this mobilization for war. Now, in the midst of this, Tony Murphy took on a really interesting campaign of confronting Pamela Geller on the MTA ads. We've gone to the MTA hearings how many times over the years and spoken against fare hikes, against the attacks on the unions, against the closing of more and more subway stations, against doing away with the student fare cards. But this time, it was a different kind of going to the MTA. So there was both a morning picket line and then going into the hearing and both testifying and doing all kinds of creative ways with that testimony, holding up signs, doing mic checks. And then who walks in but Pamela Geller? We were about to leave. We had all testified, whatnot. Folks had to get to work. But we really made sure that when she got up to speak during the whole time, the chanting, mic checks, call-outs, and so on was going on. So we were all... by the way, she came outside while we were still standing outside and was trying to hail a cab. And so we all both circled her, but any cab refused to pick her up for about 5 minutes because we would run up to the cabs beforehand and say, "This is Pamela Geller." Anyway, and you know who New York City, cab drivers overwhelmingly. So anyway, she had to listen to a lot of shouts until the cops went all the way down the block and got a cab specially for her. Just reaffirming again, cops and Klan, cops and racists, who defends them, who protects them, who will call a cab for them just to make sure they're safely get away from people's righteous anger. But just to take this one step further, while we were all meeting there, we felt, well, if the MTA says they can go ahead with these ads, it's $6,000 for 10 ads. That's what she said she paid. Well, we're going to see if we can place an ad that is a response and that is a message of unity and solidarity and saying no to racism and anti-Muslim bigotry. This has been the campaign. I just want to actually zero in on this because we got approval just before I came to the meeting tonight. The top line, this is just the first mock-up, but it says, "Resist another war, no to racism and anti-Muslim bigotry, tool of 1% rule. We, the 99%, need unity and solidarity." Now, that's a pretty simple message, and it is going to be up in subway stations starting Monday, October 8th. It's a day after October 7th, and we're going to make it a 1-2. We've already raised almost half the money of the $6,000 that is required. We've put out an appeal online. We're getting, it's really moving, quite a number of $10, $25 donations. And that's the most important because those are the donations of people who really identify with this campaign and may have limited funds. And it's always those who have the least that do the most. It's really true. A working class party, it's something that we live on. Those of us with empty pockets somehow manage to give the most. And what we're going to do right now is take up a collection. If there's anyone here who can who can make a donation to help cover this ad, that this is an important time to put in $1 or $50 by check or by cash. It's a big help. It's a big help. Just to say, in addition, because this is a modest campaign, we never really take out paid ads, but it's a political challenge, and that's why we did it. If the MTA had said, well, they couldn't possibly their hands were tied. They had to run Pamela Geller's ads. But now they had new guidelines that were going to restrict political ads, done after the fact. So we really wanted to challenge that, and we thought this is going to be a win-win situation either way. Either they're going to accept this ad, or they're going to refuse it and hear from us in a whole different way, with an injunction, maybe with a court struggle. So we were really thinking about it, in touch with lawyers, talking about it from maybe another demonstration at the MTA, a lot of plans. So the day this ad goes up, now we may put it in different locations. Yes, we want it in Times Square, and yes, we want it at Penn Station and Union Square, but I would think also we would want it Main Street, Flushing, and 125th Street, and locations around the city where those who are most under attack and feel most under attack would identify with this. It has a little disclaimer on it. By the way, we need suggestions on where we have 10 locations, where those locations should be. There are a few people here who really know the subway system, so having a few suggestions would be very helpful. We have to have a little disclaimer on the bottom that says that this ad is paid for by the International Action Center and doesn't represent the views of the MTA. What a surprise that is. But that's okay. That's fine. And this is one more aspect of a struggle on many fronts. It's in the streets, it's in the newspapers, it's speaking online, it's speaking on Twitter, it's speaking on video. It's really mobilizing people to understand that the interests of the 99% are always, and on every issue, different, separate, and apart. We want to confront the 1% on war, on racism, on bigotry, on attacks on LGBT people, on attacks on women, on every single front, opening up political attacks and building solidarity. That is important, the most important. Understanding who's targeted and why it's so important to defend is what we're all about.
One other way to make the check.
The checks can be made out to International Action Center. So please, whatever you can do, it will make a big difference in many ways. And if you can't, whether you can make a donation or not, forwarding this on Facebook, putting it out to your list. We put out an email, but emails that are people forwarding makes the biggest, really the biggest impact. So really feel more than free. We would really request that you do that. Sending a tweet to other people, doing all those actions, and include this little link so people can make those online donations. It's people's way of responding. Thanks so much.